There's not going to be a beer in front episode this week. I've had some health problems here at the family, so had to take care of that. But I had this episode on Tang already recorded and in the can. So hopefully we'll be back with the regular beer in front next week. In the meantime, find out all about Tang. In February of 1962, an American astronaut named John Glenn climbed into a tiny capsule called Friendship 7 and became the first American to orbit the Earth. 3 times around the planet, traveling faster than a speeding bullet, and somewhere in there, he did something almost absurdly ordinary. He ate applesauce out of a tube. He dissolved sugar tablets in water, and according to the legend that would calcify around this flight for the next 60 years, he sipped a sweet, orange, vitamin-fortified drink that would become more famous than almost anything else that happened on the mission. That drink was Tang. And here's the thing about Tang that almost nobody gets right. NASA didn't invent it. NASA didn't even ask for it at first. By the time John Glenn took a sip in orbit, Tang had already been sitting quietly and pretty unsuccessfully on American grocery store shelves for 3 years. This is a story about how a mediocre breakfast drink became immortal, not because it was particularly good, but because it happened to be in the right place at the right time, and because a company with a very good ad department understood exactly what it had stumbled into. Our story starts not in a NASA test lab, but in the research kitchens of General Foods Corporation sometime in 1957. The man at the center of it is a food scientist named William A. Mitchell, who deserves his own episode, honestly, because over the course of his career, he would also invent Cool Whip, Pop Rocks, and a quick set version of Jell-O. Mitchell, along with chemist William Bruce James, formulated and trademarked Orange Tang in 1957. The problem Tang was trying to solve had nothing to do with outer space. It had to do with breakfast tables. General Foods wanted a fruit-flavored, vitamin-enriched powder that could dissolve in plain water, giving flavor and nutrients to households that didn't have easy access to fresh juice or reliable refrigeration. Think of it as kind of a nutritional shortcut. Orange juice without the orange, or the juicing, or the spoilage. It hit shelves in powdered form in 1959, packaged in a glass jar with a metallic green label, an orange metal lid, and General Foods marketed it less as a soft drink than as an instant breakfast, leaning hard on the fact that it was fortified with vitamin C and vitamin A. And then mostly nothing happened. Sales were poor. Americans in 1959 weren't exactly clamoring for powdered orange crystals when actual orange juice existed. Tang looked like it was on track to become a forgotten mid-century product, a curiosity for collectors of old grocery ads. It needed a miracle, or failing that, it needed the United States government to get into a very public competition with the Soviet Union. Here's where the timeline gets interesting, because the popular version of this story, Tang was built for astronauts, gets the order of events backwards. NASA didn't develop Tang for the space program. When the agency began planning early human spaceflight, General Foods had already developed it, and a NASA contract looked at it and essentially said, oh, the appeal wasn't romantic, it was logistical. Tang's flavor could mask the genuinely unpleasant taste of the water carried aboard early spacecraft, and because General Foods had already held military contracts, getting the product into NASA's supply chain was straightforward. There was still an engineering problem to solve, though, and it's a small detail that I love. You cannot simply pour powder into a glass of water while floating in zero gravity. So NASA engineers built a vacuum-sealed pouch that astronauts could inject water into directly, mixing the drink without ever needing gravity to help. Tang flew with John Glenn on his Mercury flight in February of 1962 and continued on the subsequent Gemini mission. It made its way into Apollo 11 as well, where Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, was unimpressed. He told an audience decades later, in his words, that the drink sucked. It didn't matter. The public wasn't tasting Tang in 1962, they were watching it. And once the cameras connected an orange packet of the breakfast powder to the most thrilling technological achievement in human history, the marketing department at General Foods knew exactly what to do with that. General Foods never explicitly claimed they invented Tang for NASA, but they also did very little to correct the assumption once the public made the leap on its own. Print ads and television commercials throughout the 60s leaned hard into the space age framing, selling Tang as the nutritious drink of the astronauts. Full stop, no further explanation needed. By 1968, the company had even sponsored ABC's broadcast coverage of Apollo 8, America's first crewed mission to circle the moon. It's worth sitting with how effective this was, because the myth didn't just survive, it metastasized into something close to common knowledge. A few forces kept it alive for decades. Iconic footage of astronauts actually drinking it, General Foods' relentless leaning into the space imagery in its ads, and a kind of cultural shorthand where a colorful powder being connected with NASA just felt satisfying. Nobody in a position to correct the record, not General Foods, not NASA, had much incentive to. In fact, as recently as the 2000s, NASA's own people had to push back on it directly. Michelle Perchinock, who managed advanced food technology for NASA, put it plainly. People always ask about Tang, and yes, the agency still uses it, but it was never developed for the space program in the first place. So what happened to Tang once the Apollo program wound down and the cultural spotlight on spaceflight dimmed? Domestically, it rode the wave through the 70s and 80s where its bright color and sugar-forward taste fit neatly into an era that loved convenience foods. It turned up in lunchboxes, summer camps, and kitchen cabinets throughout the country. But by the 90s, the cultural tide had turned. A new wave of health consciousness pushed sugary powdered mixes out of flavor in the U.S. as juices, sports drinks, and bottled teas took over the beverage aisle. Here's the twist. Tang didn't die. It just emigrated. It found enormous, durable popularity overseas, across South America, the Middle East, Asia, where it remains, by some measures, more culturally central than it ever was in the United States. In the Middle East, more than half of Tang's annual sales happen in just a 6-week window around Ramadan. By 2011, Kraft Foods was calling Tang its $12 billion brand, with global sales having nearly doubled over the previous 5 years. The product itself kept evolving as well. In 2007, Kraft reformulated Orange Tang to swap out half its sugar content for artificial sweeteners, marketing it with the tagline, "half the sugar of 100% juice." New flavors followed the brand's international expansion. You have pineapple, mango, lemon. There's even a coconut variety. So why tell this story at all? Why does it matter that a powdered breakfast drink wasn't actually invented in a NASA lab? I think it's because Tang is a near perfect case study in how a brand narrative can completely overwrite the historical record, not through lying, but through silence at the right moment. General Foods didn't fabricate a myth so much as decline to interrupt one. They let television do the talking, let footage of astronauts speak for itself, and let the public fill in the gaps with the version of the story that felt better. It's also, honestly, a pretty good origin story for any small business owner or brand person listening. Sometimes the product doesn't need to change at all. Sometimes it just needs the right audience, the right moment, and a willingness to let the story tell itself. Tang wasn't built for space, but it learned very quickly how to act like it was. Okay, well, how does Tang taste? I haven't had Tang in years, but I have the original, regular, sugar full edition. So let's have some Tang. The color is orange. It smells like Tang, to be honest with you. It smells just like it did back in the day. I mean, it's not bad. I always liked Tang as a kid growing up. I do think that it's way too sweet. Uh, Maybe I'd have to try some of the other like versions with less sugar. I will say though that the international ones are really good. I've picked some up in Mexico City. I know when Ruby went there once, I told her to bring me back some different flavors of Tang. So I hope you like this episode. It's not beer related, but I thought it was pretty interesting. So thanks so much for listening.